Alrighty. Well, hi there, everybody. Welcome to another game stream. Tonight we're gonna be a little bit different than we have been recently and go with a superhero game. Now this is a card game, but unlike some of the others we played recently, it's not a deck builder. It is a version of a card game that Fantasy Flight Games, you may remember them from Lord of the Rings, calls a living card game. So we don't actually put together a deck as we go, but instead we have several pre-made decks available, and we play them in various configurations for different scenarios. And then once we're comfortable with the game, you can build your own decks also, just like a CCG, like Magic or something similar to that. So this is the Marvel Champions core set. If you're looking for a Marvel deck builder, you want something more like Marvel Legendary from Upper Deck. This is more of a traditional deck builder, but that is for another time. Tonight we're going to try this one, and I've only got the core set, but there are somewhere in the area of $3,500 worth of expansions, if not more, for this particular game. There is a lot of content for this game out there. So let's take a look at what the core set has to offer, though. The art on the box itself is promising. It looks kind of reminiscent of, not completely reminiscent, but kind of reminiscent of Alex Ross. Has a Marvels type look to it. Alright, so this box has a learn to play guide, like so many others, and a rules reference with the more complicated rules in it. Then we have tokens for various different actions. We have status cards for various different statuses that can be inflicted, consisting of stun, confusion, and toughness. So basically just 3 decks that you use as indicators on other cards. Yeah, definitely one I think Slinky will enjoy. He's comic fan, superhero fan, so this is right there in line with that fandom. And then we have health trackers. So this game is up to 4 players, and each player is going to get a health tracker for their hero, and there's one left over for the villain, because each scenario that you're going to play through will have a specific villain associated to it. So we are going to play kind of the introductory game tonight. Oh wait, let's finish going through this, I guess. So this core set comes with 5 heroes, because mostly heroes are going to get their own decks. That's what a lot of the expansions for this game are actually new hero decks you can pick up and add to your set. But we have 5 that come with the core set, including 2 that are kind of pre-built for this getting started kind of tutorial game that we're going to play through. In the tutorial game, they recommend a 2-player tutorial game using Spider-Man and Captain Marvel, which are 2 of the heroes that this core set contains. So You have those two available, and they're fully pre-built decks, which means they have other cards that the other starter decks don't have yet. And then we also have the Black Panther, Iron Man, and last but not least, for our 5 heroes here, we have She-Hulk. So I could play a double hand tonight where I played 2 different heroes, but for simplicity's sake and to streamline it, I am just going to play a single hero against the recommended starter scenario. And the recommended starter scenario is one of 3 villains that are included in this core set. Specifically, it's the Rhino. So Rhino versus Spider-Man is what we're going to go with tonight. And then the set includes other things like additional basic cards, which can be used to supplement build your own decks. Aspect cards, which there are 5 different aspects that can be applied in the game. And using one of them can modify whatever deck you're choosing to use. The Spider-Man starting deck actually uses the Justice aspect. The Captain Marvel starter deck uses the Aggression aspect. But there's also a Protection aspect and a Leadership aspect. And I forget what the last aspect is, but you can supplement any deck that you've got built or building with an aspect that you can change from one playthrough to the next to completely change the dynamic of whatever hero you're using. So it's a nice opportunity to modify things somewhat. Your other 2 heroes, or villains that come in this starter set, are Ultron and Claw. And then besides those, you have different encounter scenarios that you can add into your various decks. This one comes with 5 different encounter scenarios. So 1 confronting Hydra, 1 confronting the Masters of Evil, 1 confronting AIM and MODOK, 1 confronting Ultron, which is already one of our villains. But maybe it's just those 4. So honestly, it was a little hard sorting through the cards at first. It took a bit to really understand what all the different cards were, how they were broken up and assigned like they were in the starter set. So I was not prepared for that being the case, but it definitely had some confusion to it. So the other aspects, just so that we cover those, are, leadership is the last one. There is a leadership aspect as well. And then, like I said, we have 5, they're called modular encounter sets that you can add to increase the difficulty. There are 3 expert level cards that can be added to increase the difficulty as well. And a whole bunch of other things that can change it up as we go through. But like I said, for the interest of streaming, we're going to keep it basic on this first playthrough and just go with Spider-Man versus the Rhino. So I'll put everybody else back. not going to use any modular encounters, and his aspect cards are already built into his deck, so I don't have to worry about those. So it may seem odd, but this is all we're using for tonight's playthrough. So, yeah, $3,500 worth of expansions, and you're using like 100 cards at a time, maybe. But yeah, the art is really good in this game, Slinky. I do appreciate that. But it's a Marvel game, so I would be shocked if it was not good art. So the setup is, I don't want to say convoluted, but there are some mechanics that are involved in it that I don't want to claim any mastery of yet, so we're going to follow along with the book. There are components in the hero decks called obligations and nemesis. So the nemesis is a small deck of cards that have one of the hero in that, or one of that hero's arch villains, and they're put aside at the beginning and can be brought into play by certain cards that come up in the villain's scheme deck. And the obligation is something that each hero has to specifically deal with. Here's Peter's obligation that is going to be shuffled into the scheme deck and be an obstacle that'll pop up randomly at some point in the game. So Peter's deck consists of our hero card, and the hero cards have both a civilian identity and a hero identity that you can alternate back and forth between, depending on which one is needed for other types of cards to be played, or what you need to do on any given turn. So that's completely up to the player. It can be done at will, once per turn. Then each character is going to have a deck of cards that are specifically their core deck. So Spider-Man here has 15 cards in his deck. They're all numbered in the bottom left corner. And then you have the aspect cards I was mentioning, and for this game, Spider-Man's going to have the Justice aspect, which are all these yellow cards, and they'll contain different allies, different events, different things like that. And then the deck's rounded out by several basic cards, and these are basically freebies that you can use to supplement whatever deck you're building. So those are the different components of the deck. As for card types, well, you have, like I said, the allies. So Black Cat here is an ally for Spider-Man's deck. You've got events, which can serve as attacks, defense, various other things throughout the game. So here's a dodge defense event. You have support cards, which offer a whole variety of abilities. Funny, she doesn't look like Marissa Tomei at all. And then you have upgrade cards, which boost character abilities as you go. And that's about it for card types as well. Oh, I guess there is one other type in the resource card. So they're more the rare cards in the deck, so resources, it'll pop up as a nice surprise. And then the villain, there are actually multiple levels of the villain, so in order to win the game, you have to defeat however many levels you have in play. So each villain's going to come with 3 levels, which are denoted by the icon in the upper right corner. For this first tutorial type game, we're supposed to only play with 2 levels of Rhino, so I will set one aside for now. And then each villain has a main scheme, or several main schemes. In Rhino's case, he has just one, so the break-in is his only scheme for this particular game. And then, similar to what heroes had, the villains can have attachments that will go onto their villain card to boost their stats and abilities. They have minions that can come into play and act like allies for the hero deck. They've got treachery cards. They've got side scenes, which are side missions that you're going to have to do. And that's about it for their deck. They also have what are essentially aspects, I guess they're called. But theirs are more like scenarios that you can use to supplement their decks. Like this one is called Bomb Scare and has 6 cards in it, but it gets added as a set to the villain's core deck. So, yeah. That's the makeup of the enemy deck. So, we only need 1 hit point counter because all we have is Spider-Man. So the first part of setting up is to set hit points. So the starting hit points are denoted on the bottom of each card here. So Rhino, it says 14, and then it has a little character icon next to it, which means Rhino actually starts with 14 hit points times the number of heroes in the game. So if we were playing 2, he would start with 28 hit points. But we're not, so he will start with 14. However, because there are 2 levels of Rhino, you have to defeat him twice. It's like a video game boss fight. Once he's knocked down to 0 health, he advances to his second form, and we get to fight him again. Spider-Man, alternatively, has 10 hit points. And then each of the hero cards also denote what the hand size for that hero is. So you will draw up to the number of cards that the hero card states. So 10 hit points with which to beat Rhino twice. So normally you would set first player, we set aside the obligation cards, that's 1 per hero, set aside the nemesis sets, which for Spider-Man is Vulture. Of all of the nemesis he could have had, it's not the Michael Keaton, but the old man version of Vulture. So I've never found him to be one of Spider-Man's more intimidating villains. So then we set aside our hero card, and we shuffle the player decks. And we bust out all of our various tokens, which I'll take a look at and tell you what each of those mean here momentarily. And we bust those out and set them aside. And then we set up our Villain's Scheme deck. So here's my hero draw deck. Here's my hero card. And then I have my obligation and my nemesis set aside with my status cards over here. It's not a game that requires a massive play area either, which is kind of nice compared to some of those games we've played recently that stretch way out. Although I have yet to run across anything that can hold a candle to Battle Masters from the early 80s with its 8x4 play area, 8 foot by 4 foot play area. Alright, so now for the villain. We have to set up the villain's deck. So, set the villain's hit points. Resolve the scheme setup if there is any. So, the scheme is actually a two-sided card. You'll have setup on one side, which is the 1A. And once you set up, you will flip to 1B. And then we create the encounter deck. So, for the encounter deck, you put all of the regular cards in that it comes with, and then you take your hero's obligation cards and you put those in as well. Don't do anything with the nemesis cards because those are going to depend on another card coming into play, whether or not those get used. And the other nice thing about this game is that it allows for mulligans. So if you don't like the cards you draw on your starting hand, you can discard and redraw as many as you want. So I don't know what cards are good and what cards aren't, so we're not taking any mulligans tonight, but the option is there for future playthroughs. So for our villain setup, we have our villain deck, our villain card, both levels. And then for Rhino's break-in scheme, the setup says Rhino's attacking a shield facility. Rhino and standard encounter sets, one modular encounter set, bomb scare, advance to stage 1B. So the setup for this scenario was already done for us in the starter deck. And for the break-in, it said Rhino's trying to smash through the facility wall and steal a shipment of vibranium. If this stage is completed, the players lose the game. So there is Rhino's main scheme. And you win the game by taking out all of however many versions of the villain you have available. So in this case, 2. As far as the tokens, we have damage tokens. We have counters, which are generic for whatever other cards require them. We have threat tokens. And we have acceleration tokens. And a first player marker, which really doesn't matter in a solo game. So various cards are going to have various errata and different things that we need to do and keep track of, and those are the tokens that we're going to use to do that. So lastly, for the Rhino, just to double check his win criteria. His win is to, I think, hit a certain number of threat on his scheme. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I knew that, but I couldn't remember it offhand. The number of threat on his scheme is in the upper left corner there, and it is also times the number of players. So the more players you have, the more threat it's got to collect. So it's a sliding scale time limit, essentially. And then the game essentially progresses in a hero round, villain round, back and forth until everything's done. I don't know why there's so much glare. I don't have any overhead lights on. It's weird. Let me see if I can adjust that somewhat, because otherwise it makes for a pretty terrible watching experience to watch a card game in which you can't read the cards. So that didn't help at all. Apparently lighting's another thing that I'm not any kind of an expert at. Well, okay then. Let me see if maybe closing the curtain will help. Give me just 1 second. Yep, that didn't help either. Okay, so I don't know why everything is flared out. But I'll try to make sure each card gets in front of the detail view camera so everybody can see kind of what they look like as we go. That's really strange. I imagine it's something in my settings, and I don't know what that is. Appearance, video. Yeah, I'll have to try and figure that out in the future, because it doesn't make much sense to me. Oh wait, hold on here. Filtering, blending, de-interlacing. I don't know what any of that stuff means. Color space, color range. Yeah, sorry everybody, I'll have to learn a little more about video settings before next stream, because I just don't know. Can't anything just be plug and play? I'm not incredibly technically proficient, so I'm usually just winging it as it is. Anyway, as I was saying earlier, Spider-Man has a hand size of 6, and all of your heroes are always going to start in their civilian persona. So draw a hand up to 6, and in this game, instead of buying cards, you actually will be spending resources to activate cards. So all your cards still have a number in the upper left corner, which is their cost, but down in the bottom left corner they have a symbol which indicates their attribute. So for the purposes of this game, we will be paying a price to activate cards rather than adding new cards to our deck. The sledgehammer to fix the lighting. I mean, I guess in some aspects that would take care of the lighting problems, but in others it might present new issues. I don't know. I'll keep that in the back of my mind for potentially future solutions. Alright, so there are also basic actions that you can do with each hero. There's a basic attack, a basic defense. There's an action called thwart, which allows you to reduce the threat. And in their civilian persona, there is an action called recover. So that's where you can heal up and get hit points back. So Peter's got a recover of 3. And then in Spider-Man persona, he's got a thwart of 1, an attack of 2, and a defense of 3. Plus, of course, they all have special abilities. Spider-Man's is his Spider Sense. So that allows me to interrupt attacks. And then as Peter, he's got an ability to generate a resource. And that resource is mind, I think. There are 4 resource types in the game. So 4 different values that we're going to have 4 different values that we're going to have to use to purchase and activate different abilities. Those resources are mental, physical, energy, and wild. So there's technically 3, but the wild appears as a 4th icon and becomes whatever you want it to be. So there you go. That's essentially everything that we need to know to play yonder game. Just one quick last look to see if I missed anything at all. I have to say that especially with first-time playthroughs, sometimes my ADHD presents a bit of a challenge because I'll read an entire rule book possibly 2 to 3 times, and I'll sit down and immediately forget most of what it said. Fortunately, it's not quite that bad, not most, but I certainly don't remember everything. Fortunately, there are these little cheat cards that are included as well. So, reference cards that you can use to refer to each of the 2 play phases that we're going to be using. So I'll probably be referencing that multiple times throughout play. So for educational purposes, I will read the reference card for you guys so you know exactly what turns are going to consist of. So for the villain, we're in the hero phase. So in the hero phase, on your turn, you may play cards, trigger and request actions, use basic attack, thwart, recovery powers, change your form, and end your turn. After all players have finished, each player simultaneously discards any number of cards from their hand, draws up to their hand size, and readies each of their exhausted cards. So some cards are going to require that they be exhausted when they're used, which means essentially the same thing that tapping a card in Magic means, just turning it on its side. So they all reset at the end of every turn. even turning the camera away didn't get rid of the glare. Hold on a second. That's really bugging me. Nobody wants to watch something like that, I assume. I wouldn't. Let's see if I can move the camera closer. Oh, that's significantly better. Well, it's a little better. Okay, well, that makes things a bit better. At least you can kind of see the art now. That's nice. But like I said, I'll make sure I put each of them in front of the camera as we go to try and let you see the detail on them. So all of the 6 cards that I drew initially here have a single resource. So that makes them kind of expensive. The 3 and the 4 cost cards makes them kind of expensive because, well, I'd have to throw 3 or 4 different cards at them to activate them. So the best bet would probably be to just instantly go to Spider-Man form so I can start, pounding away on the Rhino, because the faster we take him out, the easier it's going to be on us. So you can change forms again once per turn, and then I can basic attack for 2 because that's Spider-Man's basic attack power, or I can use any of the special events or upgrades that I can afford. So in this instance, if I wanted, I could use an interrogation room and a first aid, which both have 1 attribute, and I could activate this haymaker, and that would do 3 damage. So haymaker, some nice artwork of the Captain America Falcon punching Baron Zemo, and as an event it deals 3 damage to an enemy. Now the flavor text is amazing on that card. It says wham. So I can do 3 damage, knocking Rhino down to 11 hit points right out of the gate. And then for the basic abilities, sorry, that's one that I need to double check. Using a basic power, declare the power you want to use, pay the power's cost. This is done by exhausting the hero or alter ego. Resolve the effect described on the next page. So basically you can use any of their 3 abilities in hero form or their recover ability in their civilian guise once per turn. You get to pick which one. You would exhaust the card after you use it, and it would reset at the end of your turn. So I can go ahead and use this against Rhino and just do another attack for my 2 basic attack, knock him down even further to 9 hit points. And then if I wanted, I can also purchase an upgrade because I have web shooters here, which only costs a single attribute. So I would only have to sacrifice 1 other card to get this, and it allows me to generate extra resources. So I'm paying 1 resource to get up to 3 resources. So I will do that. So I'll get rid of webbed up in order to buy a web shooter. And that's essentially everything I'm able to do for this particular first round. I'll put my 3 markers on my web shooter. Some cards are going to have special abilities that require specific attributes to activate, which is why you have the various kinds. But others will just have their base cost. So that's essentially the end of my turn. So my hero card unexhausts, and then I draw back up to my hand size of 6. Alright, this is going to have to be my discard pile, because otherwise I run out of room. Alright, so now we move on to our villain turn. And on the villain turn, villain phase, we place threat on the main scheme. The villain and each engaged minion activates once per turn. If you're in hero form, the enemies attack you. You may defend before the boost card is discarded. If you are in alter ego form, the enemy's scheme. Deal an encounter card to each player. Each player reveals and resolves their encounter cards in player order. And then we're back into a hero phase. So, okay, we place 1 threat. I think these are the threat markers, right? Terrible at remembering which token is which, too. That's an acceleration token. So not that. The threat markers are these. So we place 1 threat on our villain's main scheme. We draw an encounter card, which in this case is a side scheme. Panicked civilians crowd the area. It is difficult to confront Rhino without putting them at risk. Get the people to safety. So this one is called Crowd Control and has what's called a crisis icon on it. And the crisis icon means that I can't remove threat, so I can't use my thwart ability while this is in play. So I will need something that allows me to remove a side scheme or pay the cost to remove it, which in this case is 2 times the number of players, in order to get that out of my way and be able to thwart the schemes again. And that's it. Like, end of villain phase. So now we're right back into hero phase, and just like before, we can spend and play cards from our hand. But honestly, I'm just going to keep punching Rhino because it's kind of comic accurate. That's almost all Spider-Man does when he fights Rhino, is shoot webs and punch him. So definitely not one of Spider-Man's more complicated villains. Oh, wait. Never mind, I'm dumb. I forgot that Rhino was supposed to attack on his turn, so, I will let him attack. And doing that means that I can use my Spider Sense as an interrupt. When the villain initiates an attack, I can draw a card. So I would have had an extra card in my hand, but it wouldn't have mattered. Didn't really make any difference for me, and I take 2 damage, putting me down to 8 hit points. Alright, so I get some freebies on this turn because I have a 0 cost card, which is an interrupt, which means any amount of threat that would be placed on a scheme I can take as damage instead. So don't really want to use that right this minute, because we're not putting any threat in play. So what I may do is try to see if I can spend enough points to recruit Mockingbird, because with an ally I get extra attack. Unfortunately, these small icons below both the attack and thwart values means that they take reciprocal damage, so when Mockingbird attacks, she would actually take 1 damage, and she's only got 3 hit points, so yeah, that's kind of a trade-off, but most allies are going to have that reciprocal damage like that. There's a helicarrier I can buy. The helicarrier allows me to reduce the resource costs of the next card the player pays for by 1. There's a For Justice event, which allows me to remove threat from a scheme. There's Aunt May, who, if I'm in alter ego, allows me to heal 4 damage. Or there's a massive attack with the swinging web kick, deal 8 damage to an enemy. So in a single player game, with Rhino already down to 9 hit points, if I wanted, I could do 1, 2, 3 energy, purchase or activate the swinging web kick to deal 8 damage to Rhino, knocking him down to 1, and then use Spider-Man's basic attack for another 2 damage, knocking him down to 0, beating Rhino's first phase, which was honestly pretty easy. So first phase is gone, and then Rhino regenerates in his second phase, which in this one he has a hit point value of 15 times the number of players. And that was essentially all I could really do in that particular hero phase, because, well, I don't really have the cards to spend to activate anything else. So I'll call it end of phase, draw my hand back up to 6. Reset my hero card. Oops. And then into the villain phase, so we add a threat. We attack, so Rhino, oops, it was actually 3 damage last time, and then he hits me for another 3, knocking me down to 4 hit points. And then we resolve an encounter this time. Oh, well, right off the bat, I get Spider-Man's obligation card. So may flip the alter ego to choose one. I can either exhaust myself to remove the eviction notice from the game. Oh yeah, I did. Thank you, Slinky. So Spider Sense, I get to draw a card. Or I can discard 1 card at random from your hand. This card gains Surge, discard the obligation. So 2 ways to get rid of it. Otherwise it just kind of sits there. Yeah, I don't know. So I will go ahead and flip to Peter Parker and exhaust him just to get rid of that obligation card. And then, well, that was my encounter. So now I've got an exhausted hero that doesn't exhaust until the end of this turn, and I'm down to 4 hit points. So it seemed like everything was one-sided in that first round, but it turned around pretty quick. Let's see what we can do. I am going to start out by using a card to buy Aunt May, and then exhausting her to recover 4 hit points as long as I'm in Peter Parker mode. And then I will go ahead and spend 3 more energy. Fortunately, a card like Strength here with Hulk gives 2 energy instead of just the 1, so spend 3 energy to go ahead and get Mockingbird, and that's essentially it for this turn. I don't have much else I can do, so I'll draw back up to 6 cards. And I will unexhaust Peter Parker. And then we will move on to the villain's turn. So for the villain's turn, we will add 1 threat. And then, because we're in our alter ego form, we will be using Rhino's scheme rather than his attack. So he's got a scheme value of 1. When he was revealed, I'm supposed to also play Shaken and Taken, which is a side mission. Or Breaking and Taken, I guess it is. So that's a side mission that needs to be played / in play. Rhino is breaking things and taking them. When revealed, place an additional 1 threat here times the number of players. Hazard icon, deal +1 encounter card during the villain phase. And it has a cost of 2. So that was my bad. So when revealed, places an extra threat. And now that we've moved into the encounter, I didn't resolve his scheme, did I? This is round 3. His scheming means 1 more threat, putting it up to 5, which is not awesome. But, I also forgot to recover Aunt May at the end of the last turn. So now, because of that scheme being in play, we draw 2 encounters. The first one is a minion. So from now on, whenever Rhino attacks, his minion attacks also. And the next one is Explosion, which is a treachery. When revealed, if bomb scare is in play, assign X damage among heroes and allies, where X is the amount of threat on bomb scare. If bomb scare is not in play, this card gains Surge. I gotta be honest, I don't know what Surge is, so let me check that real quick. If a player reveals an encounter card with the Surge keyword during step 4 of the villain phase, that player draws and reveals an additional card from the encounter deck immediately after resolving the original card. So that just means another encounter, which this time is a Hydra Mercenary. So a second minion in play on Rhino's side, which may very well be painful in my next turn. We'll have to see. So moving into my next turn, I will use Aunt May to recover back up to 10 hit points so that I'm at my hero's max before changing modes back to Spider-Man. And then I will spend 3 energy to use another swinging web kick, doing 8 damage to Rhino. That card seems ridiculously overpowered. I don't know. But I'll do 8 damage to knock Rhino down to 7 hit points. And then I will attack with Spider-Man to inflict 2 more damage. And attack with Mockingbird, taking that 1 blowback damage to knock Rhino down to 4. So, pretty close to getting a win out of this one. Rhino's sitting at 4 hit points, and I'm, well, not still, but back to max. So, we'll call that the end of this turn. And, oh, actually, before we call that the end of this turn, I'm going to use all 3 web counters to generate 3 additional resource to purchase Jessica Jones and use Jessica to attack for 2 damage. So Rhino is down to 2 hit points. So that makes things look even better for us. So done with that turn, we will refresh all of our exhausted cards, draw back up to 6. And make it Rhino's turn. That puts the threat on Rhino's scheme up to 6. Keeping in mind he only needs 7 to win, so I probably should have thwarted that a little bit. But it is what it is. So this time, all 3 of them are going to attack, his minions and... Oh, Hydra Bomber does say, when revealed, choose to either take 2 damage or place 1 threat on the main scheme. So I'll take the 2 damage because I was going to heal with Aunt May anyway, which would have... I only healed 2, but Aunt May allows me to heal 4, so either way it would have put me back up to max hit points. And then the Hydra Mercenary has a guard ability, so if I were to attack him, or if I were to try and... Oh, crap. So if I were to try to attack Rhino last turn, I have to give Rhino 3 hit points back because I can't attack him while that Hydra Mercenary is in play. So Spider-Man's 2 attack and Mockingbird's 1 attack take out the Hydra Mercenary, and then I use Swinging Web Kick and Jessica Jones as regular attacks against Rhino. Yeah, that's pretty funny, right, Slinky? Rhino's not exactly the scheming type. He's not known for his deep thoughts, but... oh well, I guess somebody must be controlling him behind the scenes. Alright, so villain gets their attack phase, which means I'm going to take 4 damage, draw a card for Spider Sense, take the 4 damage from Rhino's attack of 3 and the Hydra Bomber's attack of 1, which puts me back down to 6. Draw an encounter card and pray it doesn't add any threat because that'll be game over. Enhanced Ivory Horn attached to Rhino. I'd have to spend 3 resources to get rid of this card. And while it's attached, it gives Rhino +1 attack. So, Rhino gets a fancy horn. And it's back to my turn. There's not a whole lot that I need to do here. I can probably just attack with Mockingbird and Jessica Jones. That's 3 hit points, knocking him down to 2. And then attack with Spider-Man's basic attack for those last 2. And voila, Rhino is defeated. So Spider-Man saves the day again, which, I mean, it's Rhino. No big surprise there. I wonder if it was the Paul Giamatti Rhino from Amazing Spider-Man 2. We can always pretend in our headcanon that that was the case. But yeah, that's the gist of Marvel Champions. It can be a pretty fast-paced game. You don't have to worry about building up a deck over time. You start as powerful as you're going to be. Whereas in a deck builder, you start essentially nil and have to build up over time. But yeah, it's interesting, and the fact that you have so many different options for heroes, villains, whatever, means there is a ton of replayability available to it. As you can see here, just for the fun of it, if we look at the expansions available for this game, we'll see that there's 51 listed here, most of which are as simple as new hero decks. So you can probably find your favorite hero if you go through it, but then there are several additional core sets as well that expand with, you know, more villains, more schemes, more scenarios, like this one here, the Next Evolution set containing a whole bunch of X people, and well, it would just take forever to collect all of the expansions that this set has, and would be really ridiculously expensive. So 51 of them out there. Plenty of opportunities to play whatever your Marvel situation of choice is. But yeah, those are the basics. That's an introduction to what Marvel Champions is all about. I think there is, Slinky. Let me take a look here. The board game website was moving a little slow, so I'm going to check Amazon. Hope that's running a little better. So, absolutely, there is a Captain America deck to be had. Don't know why it's not letting me select that, but nope, not that one. Okay, don't know why it's not letting me share that. Let me do it this way instead. So there is a Cap expansion to be had out there, and like I said, pretty much every other Marvel character, well, not every, but most of the other Marvel characters that you could ever care about are going to have their own expansions as well. There are definitely a couple out there that I want to get a hold of. Archangel is one of my favorite X-Men, so there's an Archangel expansion out there. I'd like to get this Age of Apocalypse set because that's one of my favorite X-Men stories. Just a lot of different play configurations out there. Rise of the Red Skull is a pretty Hydra heavy deck, or Hydra heavy set with several upgrade components to it. So yeah, lots of stuff. Sinister Motives, that's Sinister 6 oriented expansion. But plenty of goodness to be had if you find that Legends or Champions is something that interests you. So I think that's probably about it for tonight, though. As a contrast, before we start playing, Star Wars Outer Rim on Saturday, before we start playing Outer Rim on Sunday, I'll show everybody what a DC deck builder looks like by comparison. So, and we may also take a look at the Marvel Legendary. Interesting thing about Legendary is Marvel's just one of many properties in it, but Legendary also has a Matrix version, an X-Files version, an Aliens version, a Predator version, a Doctor Who version. There are a lot of different themes of Legendary out there. So, and it's nice that you can learn one play mechanic and use it across several different varieties of the game. But we can take a look at those and see if one of them maybe makes it to the schedule for next week. But that's it for tonight. So if anybody has any questions about the game or observations or wants to know anything, you all know how to get a hold of me. And I'm off to finish the editing on my next deep dive video to hopefully get it up tonight. And I'll see you back here Sunday for an adventure out on the Outer Rim a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So thanks for watching, everyone, and have a nice week.